our question about your process. I think many writers at this stage are working to establish a practice and might not have a clear sense of what their process is or if they have a process. And so I was wondering if you might be able to talk a little bit about your writing practice, maybe even practically.
Yeah.
And then your process, which might not be so practical.
Well, I mean, this is, of course, I think a question whose answer changes fairly radically over time. And my process and practice now are so deeply different than they were when I was a student, at whatever level of being a student. And really all I've done since I was a teenager is try to write a decent poem. Now I don't write if I don't hear a line first. So a lot of my writing process is a kind of diligent patience, or as Keats would have it, a diligent indolence. I'm not interested in the resource I have, and I think any poet has, of just making something interesting happen in words on the page because one can, though often I think we all start there. I want to have a line that emerges from paying as genuine attention as I can to the world. And what's odd about poetic attention is that it's not a form of focus, it's a form of opening, it's a widening, so that there is often, I think, this kind of gifted moment many poets have, where there's a line or two lines or an image that seems to come in a strange way out of nowhere. And when that happens, I take it very seriously and I write that down. And if there's another line, I write it, and if not, I just wait. And a lot of my writing life now is only writing what's there to be seen or to be said and nothing more. So I'll hover over one line and two, three, and four for up to like 5 months sometimes, and then suddenly I'll be able to go back and see how a rest of a poem drops out of it. But I'm also of the sense that, you know, a poem is a kind of faded formal space, so that if you get that first line, somehow embedded in it is the possibility of the entire poem. You just don't want to, I don't want to force it, because I feel like that's bad.
Simply said. So what advice would you give to young writers or writers that are new to the practice of poetry?
Well, I would say a couple of things. Keep a notebook with you and mark down any moment in which the language around you catches your interest. Keep a note in that same notebook, like any thought that comes to you that seems of interest, one should write down. Any image that you actually see with your eye, write that down, because here you're being trained towards the qualities of your own senses, and lyric poetry understands that the mind begins in the particular woundedness of our senses, all 5 of them, and we have to kind of renegotiate our intelligence according to what's sensibly available to our bodies. And I would say that, you know, one of the kind of amazing things that happens in a class like Intro to Poetry, which I'll be teaching soon, is inevitably I'll ask them to do this thing my teacher asked me to do, to, you know, come back with an image. And what's so curious about what hampers those images is an assumption of what the beautiful or what the poetic looks like. And so I think the other advice is to understand that a lot of what learning how to write poetry isn't to reinforce what we already think is beautiful, isn't to reinforce what already seems kind of poetic, whatever that might mean, but is actually to undo those assumptions so that we have the possibility of a more profound encounter, which is to say that you have to trust the poem and its work, which is strange, more than you trust yourself, and that in the end, and it never stops being true, but the only teacher you really have is the poem that you're writing. And that's an awful irony that I can't ever get over. But how to listen to the poem means, you know, just as when you listen to a person, you have to get over your sense of who that person is ahead of time. It's the same with the poem.